Captain Zolt reclined in his command chair, admiring his collection of skulls mounted on the wall behind him. Each one represented a different species, a different world conquered, a different hunt completed. The Vex Tari had been the galaxy's premier hunters for 3 centuries, and Zolt himself had personally bagged specimens from 47 different planets. But today he was bored. "Status report," he commanded, his 4 eyes scanning the bridge of his hunting vessel, the apex predator. Because apparently irony wasn't dead in space either. Vex, his lead tracker, approached with that characteristic swagger that came from never having failed a hunt. The reptilian alien's scales rippled with excitement as he spoke. "Captain, we've completed harvesting from the Zorblat homeworld. 17 specimens total, including their war chief." "Boring," Zolt replied, examining his claws with theatrical indifference. The Zorblats were hardly a challenge. They still used projectile weapons. "What about the Kepler system?" Crick, the team's tech specialist, nervously tapped at his console. The thin, insectoid alien had a habit of overthinking everything, which made him excellent with technology but terrible at parties. "Sir, the Kepler natives were disappointing. They surrendered immediately upon seeing our ships. No sport whatsoever." Zolt's mood darkened. What was the point of being the galaxy's apex predator if everything else was so pathetically easy? He'd been hunting for decades, and lately every species seemed more cowardly than the last. Where was the challenge? Where was the thrill? "Captain," Vex said, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone, "I may have found something interesting." "Do tell." "There's a species called humans, from a planet called Earth in the Sol system. They're unique." Yeah. Zolt raised an eyebrow, or what passed for one on his angular face. "How so?" "We know." Crick pulled up a holographic display showing a bipedal creature that looked remarkably ordinary. "They're mammals, Captain. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced senses. They can't even see in multiple spectrums." "Sounds pathetic," Zolt said. But something in Vex's expression suggested there was more to it. "That's what makes them perfect," Vex continued. "According to our intelligence, they've somehow become the dominant species on their planet despite being physically inferior to most of their world's predators. They've even begun expanding into space." "Fascinating," Zolt mused. "And you think they'd provide decent sport?" "Better than decent," Vex replied, his excitement growing. "I've identified a perfect specimen. Lives alone in a remote location, far from other humans. According to their military records, he's something called a Green Beret. Apparently that means he was trained for warfare." Crick looked up from his console, worry evident in his compound eyes. "Sir, if he's trained for warfare, perhaps we should reconsider." "Nonsense," Zolt interrupted. "Look at him. No claws, no fangs, no natural weapons whatsoever. How dangerous could he possibly be?" The hologram displayed images of a middle-aged human male with graying hair, living in what appeared to be a primitive wooden structure. The creature looked completely unremarkable, even by human standards. "His name is Jake Morrison," Vex continued. "Age 52, retired from military service. He lives completely alone in what humans call the wilderness. Perfect hunting conditions." Zolt felt the familiar thrill of a new hunt beginning to course through his veins. "Excellent. And the best part is, once we've proven we can hunt their finest warrior, the rest of the species will know to fear us. It'll be the perfect demonstration of Vex Tari superiority." "The capture ship is already prepared, Captain," Vex said. "We can have him in the preserve within the cycle." "Outstanding." Zolt stood and walked to the viewing port, staring out at the stars. "Prepare the hunting preserve. Full environmental controls, standard prey protocols. This human is about to learn why the Vex Tari are the galaxy's apex predators." As the ship changed course toward Earth, None of them bothered to research what exactly a Green Beret was trained to do. After all, how dangerous could one little human really be? They were about to find out. Jake Morrison woke up with the kind of headache that usually followed either too much bourbon or getting hit by a truck. Since he'd been sober for 3 months and living in the middle of nowhere, Montana, the truck option seemed unlikely. He opened his eyes to find himself lying on what looked like grass, but grass that was slightly too blue and had an odd metallic sheen. The sky above was purple with 2 suns, which was definitely not right for Montana. Either he'd been kidnapped by aliens, or that experimental whiskey he'd been aging had gone very, very wrong. Rise and shine, primitive creature, came a voice from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jake sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. He was in what appeared to be a massive enclosed environment, maybe 10 square miles, with various terrain types visible in the distance. Forest, desert, rocky outcroppings, even what looked like a swamp. It was like someone had built the world's most elaborate terrarium. "Welcome to Preserve 7, the voice continued, and Jake could hear the smugness dripping from every word. "I am Captain Zolt of the Vextari Hunting Guild. You have been selected for the honor of being hunted by the galaxy's premier predators." "Well, that's just fantastic," Jake muttered, getting to his feet. His military training kicked in automatically as he assessed his situation. No weapons, unknown terrain, hostile environment, multiple potential threats. Standard Tuesday, really. "The rules are simple," Zolt continued. "You run, we hunt. You hide, we find you. You die, we win. You have a standard cycle to prepare yourself, then the hunt begins." Jake looked around more carefully. The environment was impressively detailed, with what appeared to be real plants and animals scattered throughout. Someone had put a lot of effort into making this place feel authentic. "Question," Jake called out to the air. "You folks ever hunt anything that hunts back?" There was a pause, then what sounded like chuckling. "How quaint. The prey thinks it's a predator." "Just curious," Jake said, starting to walk toward what looked like a forested area. "Because where I come from, there's a difference between hunting and warfare. You might want to make sure you know which one you signed up for." As he walked, Jake's mind raced through possibilities. These aliens had clearly done this before. They had the technology to build this place, the resources to kidnap him from Earth, and probably weapons far beyond anything he'd ever faced. But they'd also made one crucial mistake. They'd grabbed a Green Beret. Jake had spent 25 years in Special Forces. He'd fought in jungles, deserts, mountains, and urban environments across 3 continents. He'd trained in survival, guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, and about a dozen other skills that weren't listed on his official record. More importantly, he'd spent the last 5 years living alone in the Montana wilderness, hunting elk with a bow and living off the land. He was in the best shape of his life and had been getting pretty bored with retirement anyway. "Your cycle begins now," Zolt announced. Jake heard something moving through the forest behind him. Something big, trying to be quiet and failing. He smiled for the first time since waking up. "Hey, Captain," he called out. "One more question. When you researched humans, did you happen to look up what we did to the other apex predators on our planet?" No answer came, but Jake could hear his stalker getting closer. Time to give these aliens their first lesson in human nature. He disappeared into the tree line just as something with far too many teeth crashed through the underbrush where he'd been standing. The hunt had begun, but Jake had a feeling these aliens had no idea what they'd actually unleashed. After all, humans hadn't climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by being prey. They were about to learn that some species earned their place at the top. 3 hours into the hunt, Vex was beginning to question his research methodology. The human had vanished into the forest preserve like smoke, leaving behind only a trail that seemed almost deliberately misleading. Every time Vex thought he'd cornered his prey, he'd find nothing but cleverly arranged branches and rocks. "Status report. Captain Zolt's voice crackled through the comm system. The human is more elusive than anticipated, Vex replied, studying his scanner readings. But I have him contained within the forest sector. It's only a matter of time. Excellent. I do enjoy it when prey provides adequate sport. That's when Jake's voice cut through their communication channel, clear as day. Hey there, boys, Jake Morrison here. Just wanted to say thanks for the lovely accommodations. Really top-notch terrarium you've got here. Vex froze. How is he accessing our communications? Oh, that's easy, Jake continued, his tone conversational. Turns out your comm system uses pretty standard encryption protocols. Took me about an hour to crack with some of the tech you left lying around. Sloppy, really. Crick's panicked voice came through the channel. That's impossible. Our encryption is military grade. Yeah, so was the stuff I was breaking 30 years ago, Jake replied. But hey, let's talk about your hunting strategy. Vex, right? The big scaly fellow with the attitude problem? Vex's scales rippled with indignation. How do you know my name? Well, you've been announcing yourselves over comms for the past hour. But more importantly, you've been tracking me with heat signatures, which is adorable. Really shows you've never hunted anything that actually understood tactics. Vex looked down at his scanner, which showed Jake's heat signature approximately 50 meters ahead. He raised his plasma rifle and moved forward carefully. See, the thing about heat signatures, Jake continued, is they're really easy to fake if you know what you're doing. All you need is a small fire, some reflective materials, and a basic understanding of thermal dynamics. Vex reached the position indicated by his scanner to find a small campfire surrounded by mirrors made from polished metal strips. There was no sign of Jake. But the real question is, Jake's voice continued, now seeming to come from directly behind Vex, how much attention were you paying to where you stepped? Vex spun around just in time to see a complex arrangement of branches and vines snap into motion. Before he could react, he found himself hanging upside down from a tree, his rifle spinning away into the underbrush. Primitive snare trap, Jake explained helpfully. We've been using variations of this design for about 10,000 years. Nothing fancy, just good old-fashioned physics and an understanding of momentum. This is impossible. Vex snarled, struggling against the ropes. You're just prey. Yeah, about that, Jake said, stepping out from behind a tree about 20 feet away. I think there might be some confusion about the food chain here. Crick's voice crackled through the comm, high-pitched with panic. Captain, all of our external sensors in the forest sector just went offline. What do you mean, offline? Zolt demanded. I mean something is systematically disabling our surveillance network, Crick replied. We're losing coverage by the minute. Jake picked up Vex's plasma rifle and examined it with interest. Nice weapon. Bit over-engineered, but I can work with it. Thanks for the donation. You can't use that, Vex protested. You don't understand the technology. Jake found what was obviously the safety mechanism and flicked it off. Point and shoot, right? Some things are universal. He aimed at a nearby rock and fired, vaporizing it instantly. Yep, pretty straightforward. This changes nothing, Zolt's voice boomed through the comm system. You may have bested one hunter, but you're still trapped in our preserve with nowhere to run. Run? Jake laughed. Captain, I think you're still confused about what's happening here. I'm not running from you. He looked directly at one of the remaining surveillance cameras and smiled. I'm hunting you. The camera exploded in a shower of sparks. By hour 6, Crick was having what humans would call a nervous breakdown, though the Vextari term translated more accurately to catastrophic logical failure. He stared at his control console in disbelief as system after system reported failures. Captain, he said, his voice cracking, we've lost 60% of our sensor network, Both hunting drones are offline, and somehow he's managed to reverse engineer our shield generators. What do you mean, reverse engineer? Zolt demanded. I mean, he's built his own, Crick replied, pulling up a grainy surveillance feed. Look. The screen showed Jake Morrison sitting calmly beside a small campfire, surrounded by what appeared to be a shimmering energy field. He was roasting what looked like some kind of alien creature on a spit, while casually reading from a tablet. Where did he get that tablet? Zolt asked. That's our technical manual, Crick whispered. He downloaded it from Vex's equipment. Jake looked up at the camera and waved. Good evening, folks. Hope you don't mind, but I borrowed some reading material. Fascinating stuff, really. Did you know your entire technological base is built around the same principles we figured out in the 1940s? Just scaled up a bit. That's impossible, Zolt snarled. Our technology is centuries ahead of your primitive civilization. Well, that's the funny thing about technology, Jake said, taking a bite of his dinner. It's not really about how advanced it is. It's about understanding the principles behind it. And the principles haven't changed much since we split the atom. He held up a small device he'd apparently constructed from various pieces of alien equipment. For instance, this little gadget here? It's broadcasting a signal that makes your sensors think I'm in 17 different locations simultaneously. Basic signal manipulation, really. We were doing this kind of electronic warfare back when I was a lieutenant. Crick made a strangled noise and began frantically typing at his console. Oh, and Crick? Jake continued. Thanks for using standard quantum encryption keys. Really saved me some time. Though I have to ask, did you guys never think to randomize your access codes? How is he doing this? Crick moaned. He's just a primitive mammal. Primitive? Jake laughed. Buddy, my species figured out how to kill each other more efficiently than any other creature on our planet. We got so good at it, we had to invent rules to make it sporting. You want to know the difference between you and us? He stood up and walked closer to the camera. You hunt for sport. We hunt to survive. And we've been doing it a lot longer than you have. The comm system crackled, and Vex's voice came through, weak and filled with pain. Captain, I need immediate extraction. The human, he left me alive. What do you mean, left you alive? Zolt asked. He cut me down from that trap, patched up my wounds, and gave me a weapon, Vex said, confusion evident in his voice. Then he told me to go home. Jake's voice cut in. Vex was never the real threat. He's just a tracker. Good at his job, but predictable. The real challenge is you, Captain. The one calling the shots. You dare challenge me directly? Zolt roared. I'm not challenging you, Jake replied calmly. I'm educating you. See, this whole time you've been thinking of this as a hunt. But that's not what this is anymore. He looked directly into the camera, and his expression grew serious. This is war. And humans have been perfecting warfare for our entire existence. We've fought with sticks and stones, swords and shields, guns and bombs, and everything in between. We've studied every aspect of combat, from individual tactics to global strategy. Jake held up the alien weapon he'd taken from Vex. You gave me advanced technology and threw me into a controlled environment with limited variables. This isn't a hunt anymore, Captain. This is the most target-rich environment I've seen in years. The camera feed cut to static. Moments later, every system on the ship began receiving the same message, broadcast on all frequencies. This is Jake Morrison, formerly of the United States Army Special Forces. To any Vex Tari receiving this transmission, you have 30 minutes to surrender before I start taking this personally. Crick looked at his instruments in horror. Captain, he's somehow gained access to our entire communication network. Impossible. Sir, Jake's voice came through the comms system. With respect, You've been saying that word a lot today. You might want to consider that your definition of impossible needs some adjustment. The lights on the bridge went out. 29 minutes, Jake announced in the darkness. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as Zolt paced back and forth, his claws clicking against the metal deck. In the space of 8 hours, his perfect hunt had become a complete disaster. Status report, he demanded. Main power is offline, Crick reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Life support is running on backup systems. He systematically shut down every non-essential system on the ship. How is that possible? We're in orbit. Sir, Crick's voice cracked. He's not on the ship. He's still in the preserve. Somehow he's hacking our systems remotely using the communication network. Vex limped onto the bridge, his wounds hastily bandaged. Captain, we need to abort. This isn't a hunt anymore. This is a massacre. Coward, Zolt snarled. We are Vextari. We do not retreat from prey. That's not prey down there, Vex replied quietly. That's a predator. And we just wandered into his territory. The comm system crackled to life. 15 minutes remaining, Jake announced. Though I have to say, I'm impressed by your dedication to a clearly failed strategy. It's almost admirable. You cannot defeat us, Zolt roared at the speakers. We have superior technology, superior numbers, superior arrogance, Jake interrupted. Yeah, I noticed. Question for you, Captain. In all your hunts, have you ever faced anything that adapted? What do you mean? I mean something that learned from your tactics and changed its approach. Something that used your own strengths against you. Zolt was silent for a moment. Our prey has always been predictable. Right, so you're hunters, but you've never actually faced another hunter. You've been shooting fish in a barrel for so long, you forgot that some fish have teeth. The ship shuddered as something impacted the hull. What was that? Zolt demanded. Crick's eyes were wide with terror as he stared at his instruments. Sir, something just attached to our outer hull. It's moving. That's impossible. We're in orbit. Stop saying that word. Jake's voice came through the comm, but now it sounded like he was speaking from inside the ship. I've been listening to you say impossible all day, and frankly, it's getting old. The bridge doors hissed open, and Jake Morrison walked in, wearing what appeared to be a makeshift pressure suit constructed from various pieces of alien equipment. He was carrying Vex's plasma rifle, and had several other alien devices attached to his belt. How? Zolt whispered. Oh, that's easy, Jake said, removing the helmet of his improvised suit. I built a rocket. You built a rocket, Vex repeated flatly. Yeah, from the wreckage of your hunting drones and some of the preserve's atmospheric processors. Basic propulsion, really. We figured this stuff out in the 1950s. Crick made a sound that might have been crying. The thing is, Jake continued, once I realized you were just bullies picking on species that couldn't fight back, but this stopped being about survival and started being about education. He looked around the bridge, taking in the advanced technology with apparent interest. Nice ship, by the way. Really impressive engineering. Shame you're using it for such mundane purposes. Zolt suddenly lunged forward, drawing what appeared to be an energy sword. I am Captain Zolt of the Vextari. I have hunted across 47 worlds. Jake sidestepped the attack casually and tripped Zolt with a basic foot sweep. The alien captain crashed to the deck, his weapon skittering away. 47 worlds of defenseless prey, Jake corrected. But you've never fought a war. You've never faced an enemy that was trying to kill you just as hard as you were trying to kill them. He picked up Zolt's energy sword and examined it. Humans have been at war for our entire existence. We fought each other, our environment, and every other species on our planet. We didn't become apex predators because we were the strongest or the fastest. Jake looked down at Zolt, who was struggling to get back to his feet. We became apex predators because we never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, and never, ever gave up. He tossed the energy sword aside and offered Zolt a hand up. The hunt's over, Captain. You lost. Jake stood in the center of the alien bridge, surrounded by the most advanced technology he'd ever seen, and activated the ship's communication system. The signal would reach every Vex-Tari vessel in this sector of the galaxy. "Attention Vex-Tari fleet," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades giving briefings to military commanders. "This is Jake Morrison, human formerly of Earth. I'm broadcasting from the bridge of your hunting vessel, which is now under my control." He could see the shock on the faces of his former captors. Zolt was slumped in his command chair, looking like someone who'd just discovered the universe operated by entirely different rules than he'd thought. Vex was quietly bandaging his wounds and staying well out of the way. Crick had apparently passed out at his console. "I want to tell you a story," Jake continued, about a species that evolved on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. This species wasn't the biggest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't the fastest. Hell, they couldn't even see in the dark properly. He walked over to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. But this species had one advantage that made up for all their physical shortcomings. They were adaptable. When the ice ages came, they figured out fire and clothing. When the big predators hunted them, they invented tools and teamwork. When they ran out of room on their continents, they built boats and explored the oceans. Jake turned back to the communication array. And when they ran out of room on their planet, they started looking at the stars. He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's solar system, then expanded it to show human colonies and exploration missions. "Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that humans are just another primitive species that happened to get lucky with technology. But here's the thing about humans that you need to understand." Jake's voice grew serious. "We didn't stop being predators when we became civilized. We just got better at it." He gestured to the bridge around him. "Your entire species specializes in hunting defenseless prey for sport. You've built an industry around it. You have advanced ships, superior weapons, sophisticated technology, and one middle-aged human with basic military training just took it all away from you using nothing but ingenuity and stubbornness." Jake sat down in the captain's chair and looked directly into the communication array's visual pickup. "So here's my message to the galaxy. Humans are coming. We're expanding into space, we're exploring new worlds, and we're meeting new species. Most of the time, we're friendly. We like to trade, we like to learn, we like to make friends." He paused for effect. "But if you decide to hunt us for sport, if you think we're easy prey, if you make the mistake of underestimating us because we don't have claws or fangs or scales, then you're going to learn something that every predator species on Earth learned the hard way." Jake stood up and walked closer to the pickup. "We're not prey. We never were. We're the species that turned wolves into pets, that made tools out of everything around us, that looked at fire and said, 'I can use that.' We're the species that climbed to the top of our planet's food chain and then kept climbing until we reached the stars." He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "We're humans, and we don't lose." Jake ended the transmission and turned to face his former captors. Zolt was staring at him with something that might have been respect or possibly terror. "What happens to us now?" the alien captain asked quietly. "Now?" Jake said, settling back into the captain's chair. "Now you're going to take me home to Earth. And then you're going to spread the word to every hunting party, every slave trader, and every would-be conqueror in this part of the galaxy." He looked out at the stars again, thinking about his quiet cabin in Montana and wondering if retirement was really as appealing as it had seemed a few days ago. Humans are off limits. Permanently. 2 weeks later, Jake Morrison was back in his cabin, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee and watching the sunrise over the mountains. The Vextari had kept their word and delivered him safely home, along with a formal treaty declaring humanity off limits to all hunting activities. His satellite phone rang. It was probably the Pentagon, wanting to debrief him about his experience with alien technology. They'd been calling every day since his return. Jake looked at the phone, then at the peaceful forest surrounding his home, then at the alien communicator he'd kept as a souvenir. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was full of species that had just learned an important lesson about human nature. And somewhere else, other humans were taking their first steps into space, carrying with them the same stubborn refusal to give up that had brought Jake home. He smiled and answered the phone. After all, somebody had to make sure the galaxy understood the rules,